Hi, hello, my name is Sydney. Welcome to or welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be talking about something that every reader hates, and that is a reading slump. I was in a reading slump for about 5 or 6 months, and I was going back and forth between different books. I couldn't finish anything, nothing was catching my attention. I even tried listening to audiobooks and I just could not get into anything. I couldn't stay with one book. I couldn't even finish an audiobook. I was like dragging my feet and I absolutely hated that feeling. If you guys have ever felt that way, or if you're in a reading slump now, or just watching this video to get some tips and tricks, if you, fingers crossed, don't go into a reading slump. But if you do, hopefully you can remember some of these tips to help you get out of that reading slump, because I know, and I'm sure most of you also know, how bad and horrible the feeling of being in a reading slump is. We are going to talk about some of the books that I read that got me out of a reading slump and why I think they would be useful for you guys to read if you're in a reading slump. And we're also going to talk about some tips and tricks that I use to help me get out of this months and month-long reading slump. So let's just get into the video. The first tip I have for you guys is to read shorter books or even novellas. If you're in the middle of a series that you know you really like, or if you have an author that you really like, you can see if they have some novellas or short stories. I've seen a lot of my favorite authors, like Abby Jimenez has a couple of really good short stories out there, and I've seen that most of those ones are on Audible or Kindle Unlimited. So if you have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, you can easily read that. Novellas are a really good way to kind of dive back in, because it's not, you know, like a 500, 700 page book. And even shorter books, like around 300 pages, are less intimidating. If I was to jump back into like a 700 page fantasy, I just know I would not have finished the book, and it probably would have made me feel like I was getting deeper and deeper into my reading slump. Obviously, finishing a 700 page book takes a long time, but if you're trying to read a shorter book like a novella, it's not going to take you as much time to finish. And also, checking off that accomplishment of finishing a book just helps in the long run. For me, at least, when I finished a novella or a shorter book during my reading slump, I felt like I was accomplishing something. So definitely look on your TBR and see if you have any books that are shorter or any novellas. Maybe you're in the middle of a series and there's a novella. I think that starting off with smaller books and novellas is definitely a good place to start. The next tip I have for you guys is to switch the genre of books that you're reading. So at the time when I was getting into my slump, I was pretty much strictly reading romance books, and every single romance book that I was going in and out of just was not working for me. So I decided to switch the genre and try something different. And I think that might have been the thing that really pushed me into getting out of that reading slump, because after I switched the genre of books that I was trying to read, I immediately just could not put the book down that I was reading, which I will share with you guys later in the video. If you usually read romance, maybe try reading a mystery thriller or maybe a romantasy, something that just isn't in, not necessarily your comfort zone, but something that you don't pick up too often, but is something that you still think you would be interested in, because I guarantee that switching up the genre of the books you're picking up will help push you out of that reading slump. The third tip I have is to reread comfort books. So for me, I was a little bit nervous to do this, but I thought, you know, why not give it a try, because nothing else was working at the time. So I decided to reread one of my all-time favorite books, which is The 7-Year Slip. And that definitely helped me kind of get out of that slump that I was in. It is a romance book, and I was continually picking up these romance books, but it reminded me of how much I enjoyed reading. Remembering that love and getting back into the world that I just remembered and getting to see the characters again just put me in a place where I felt excited to read, and I was excited to pick up the book again. Obviously, I knew what was happening in the book and how the book ended, but it was just so nice to go back and reread that comfort book and see either the things that I missed or even just reread the lines and the chapters that I remember and that I absolutely loved. Think about all of the books that are kind of comfort reads or books that you maybe even rated a 5-star. Think about how you felt during those reads, and why not reread one and try to kind of get back into that mindset and fall back in love with that book and fall back in love with reading, because that definitely helped me out during my month-long reading slump. My next tip for you guys is to read, or I guess listen to audiobooks. Audiobooks are, to me, definitely still a form of reading. You are consuming the book one way or another. I think that is definitely a very helpful tip if you're, doing chores or you're doing a cozy hobby. Just throw on an audiobook and have it on in the background instead of, turning on Netflix or watching a YouTube video. Turning on an audiobook and throwing yourself into that world and at least trying to take that step into getting back into reading really, really helps. It helped me just remember that there were, stories out there that I could enjoy and that would, bring me some sort of feeling and emotion. Now, of course, I did DNF, or I guess soft DNF, a couple of audiobooks, but once I found one that I'll share later on in this video that I really, really enjoyed, and I was like, okay, I need to find more audiobooks like this. And just another little side tip, I feel like thriller mysteries are amazing books to listen to on audiobook just because they keep you guessing, they keep you coming back. They're all pretty fast paced, which I think is another thing that is good to have when you are trying to get out of a reading slump. If a book is fast paced, like most mystery thrillers are, you're gonna keep wanting to go back to it. So definitely look into any mystery or thriller books that you think you will like and try listening to them on audiobooks. The next tip I have for you guys is to let yourself DNF books. I know there are a lot of people that do not like to DNF books for whatever reason. I think that a lot of people are nervous, scared, whatever, to DNF a book because it feels like maybe they're failing in some sort of way, which is definitely how I used to feel. But after I let myself DNF a book and realized it's not going to be the end of the world, whether it was a soft DNF or a hard DNF, I just felt like there was a weight lifted off of my shoulders because I didn't feel pressured to finish a book that I wasn't enjoying at the time. So definitely allow yourself to DNF those books. You might go back and forth between a couple of different books and DNF all of those before you find a book that actually catches your attention. And that is totally okay. It's your reading journey and it's your life. Nobody is gonna get mad at you if you decide to DNF a book. So put the book down if you're not feeling it, go pick up more books, and wait until you find something that catches your attention, and don't feel bad if you can't finish a book. Another tip I have for you guys is to stop trying to read books just to check off your reading goal or your Goodreads goal. I know obviously 2026 just begun and people are trying to get a kickstart on their reading goals. I think if you are in a slump and you are just going through books and reading books just to check off a number, that is not going to help because you're probably not enjoying them if you are in a reading slump. And I think that just pushes you further and further into that slump. And if, again, kind of relating back to the previous tip, if you're not enjoying a book that you're currently reading, just DNF it. It's okay to not just read a book to check off a number and, keep counting towards that reading goal. Nobody is going to be mad at you if you don't meet your reading goal, and I think it's better to have that quality in a book over quantity. And kind of going off of the last two tips, read more for enjoyment and not for productivity. Like I said, don't try to read books just to check something off or make yourself feel more successful or anything like that. Read for enjoyment. Of course, everybody is reading for enjoyment. We're not just going through books because, we feel like we have to. Nobody is forcing you to read. Just read for enjoyment. That's literally all I can say is if you find something that you like or that there's a genre of books or tropes that you like to see in books, go for those books that you know that you've enjoyed in the past, because more than likely you will probably enjoy the books that have those tropes or the books that are in those genres. Just don't keep going along with books that you feel like are not fulfilling you at that time, and read for enjoyment and not productivity. Something that also helped me get out of my reading slump was realizing that reading isn't a chore, it's for enjoyment. And I was really trying to force myself to read, and if I wasn't enjoying the book at the beginning of my slump, I felt like I needed to push through because it felt like a chore. And if it feels like a chore, then it's probably just not the right book. If I don't feel like reading for a couple of days in a row, that's fine. So try to switch your mindset if you can, and don't think about reading as a chore. Another little reminder that I have for you guys is a reading slump doesn't mean you're a failure. Everybody has their ups and downs with reading. You're probably going to encounter a reading slump throughout your reading journey, and that's totally okay. Everybody has had that feeling. Everybody will probably encounter this if they haven't already. There's just going to be those times where you feel like you don't want to pick up a book. But I promise you, if you use some tips and tricks or try to switch your mindset, everything will work out and everything will be okay. It's not the end of the world if you don't read for a little bit. Everybody is going to get in a slump. Now we are going to talk about the books that helped me get out of a reading slump and what books I think will help you guys get out of a reading slump as well. These books are either rereads for me or caught my attention when I was reading them or listening to them, and I'm recommending these to you guys because I think that they could also, catch your attention and have the qualities that we would be looking for to help us, kind of get out of this reading slump or give us the push that we needed to get out of the reading slump that we're in. The first book that I read, or I guess reread, during my month-long reading slump was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. And oh my gosh, guys, I'm not going to go super deep into these stories, or I guess the summary of these books, just because that's not really what this video is about. This book is magical realism with very heavy romance plot, and holy crap, you guys. This book, when I first read it, and then going back into my reread when I was in that slump, it really just sparked my love for reading again, and I was going back into this world and remembering how much I loved this book, how much I loved the characters, I loved the story, and it just really helped give me that little push to get out of my reading slump. If you guys haven't read this already, I am begging you to go read this. This is like an infinity star read for me. We're following our character Clementine, who ends up inheriting a magical apartment from her aunt. Like I said, there is romance in this, and the romance is so cute. Oh my gosh, guys, I absolutely love it. And I think that the little magical realism with this apartment in this book just kind of sets this story apart from a lot of other romances that I was reading. So I knew that this was a good book to reread. I highly, highly recommend this book if you guys are in a reading slump. The next book I'm going to recommend to you guys is Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. This is the first Fredrik Backman book I have ever read, and holy crap, you guys, I get the hype. I get why Fredrik Backman is so hyped up. I had this book sitting on my TBR for a while, and for some reason I just read the back of the book and I started to get intrigued, and once I started reading it, I could not put it down. I had lost the feeling of wanting to go back into books, but once I picked this book up, I just could not put it down. Every single time I put it down, I was looking forward to the next time I could pick it up and read it because I was so enthralled in this story. And if I'm being completely honest, this book is probably the book that fully pulled me out of my slump. So if you guys are looking for a book that I think will probably pull you out of a slump, definitely pick this book up. This was also something that I hadn't really read before. It was like a little bit out of the genres that I normally reach for, and I think that was also another reason why I ended up getting out of my reading slump. So if this is something that you guys haven't read yet, or if you look at it on Goodreads and think that it might be something that you wouldn't normally pick up, I would really recommend you guys picking this up if you're in a reading slump because it was so good. Next up, I have Out on a Limb, and this is by Hannah Bowman Young. And I know a lot of people really like this book. This is a romance book, and I feel like it's not too long. It's a little over 300 pages, which is a pretty short book. So if you're looking for something that's on the shorter side, definitely pick this book up. And I absolutely love this book. This is the first book that I read from Hannah Bowman Young. This would be a good book to help you get out of a reading slump, or maybe give you that little push you needed. I was pretty much thrown into the story and immediately hooked when I was reading it. I absolutely loved it. I did not read this during my reading slump. I read this before I was in my slump. This was a really emotional read, but I think that is exactly what you need when you're trying to get out of a reading slump, because having that emotional either connection or just being able to feel how the characters are feeling throughout this book is something that is really needed when you're trying to get out of a slump or preventing yourself from getting into a slump. So these two characters, their love story, their romance, the way that they meet, everything is just so good. If you guys haven't picked up this book yet, I definitely think this is something you guys should look into. Next up, we have Assistant to the Villain. This is a kind of like comedic fantasy book. There is a little bit of romance. It's not super romance heavy though. And I definitely really enjoyed this book. I didn't read it when I was in my reading slump either. I read this, I think, before or after I was in my slump. This isn't like an all-time favorite book for me, like I know it is for a lot of people, but I think the little like comedic things that go on in this book and the light fantasy element of it will help get you out of a reading slump. It's not a huge like political system or anything like high fantasy or crazy world building that you would have to follow and really focus on. I feel like this would be a good book to listen to on audiobook, but I did really enjoy just like the bickering that happened, and I think that this story is very like kind of lighthearted, and if you haven't picked this up yet, I definitely recommend. And I think again it would be a really good book to help you get out of a reading slump, especially if you enjoy fantasy or enjoy kind of like the comedic little aspect in a fantasy or in books in general. And if you maybe haven't even picked up a fantasy before but are trying to branch out into different genres, maybe romance is really all that you read and you're trying to dip your toes in the water with fantasy, I think this is a perfect fantasy book to start off with. Next we have Caraval, and this is a trilogy, and it also has like an interconnected trilogy with it as well. But this is the first book in the Caraval trilogy, and if you know me, you know that this is one of my all-time favorite books. I absolutely love the Caraval trilogy. This is fantasy and this is YA. There is romance in this as well, but oh my gosh, you guys. The world building, it's not super crazy, but the world that you're thrown into and everything that happens, like the trial and the characters that you meet, I just automatically fell in love with this book from the jump. Chapter 1, I could not put it down. After I finished this book, I immediately went and bought the second book. After I finished the second book, I immediately went and bought the third book. And I don't even think I've ever done that with any other trilogy or series, going out and buying the book immediately after I finished the previous book in the series. And I just fell in love with this world, fell in love with the characters, all of the little things and everything that just went into it. If you guys have not read this book yet, I am begging you to pick it up. I think this is the perfect book to help get you out of a reading slump because it has so much going on in it and it's so fast paced, which is definitely something that will help get you out of a slump. So if you guys have not picked this up already, I am begging you to pick this up. I'm going to recommend you guys 2 more books that I don't actually have the physical copies of. So the first one is The Fall Risk, and this is by Abby Jimenez. This is a novella. I read it on Kindle Unlimited, and holy crap, guys, I did not know that I could love a novella or a short story as much as I loved this one. This book was so good. It was exactly what I needed. But Abby Jimenez is also one of my favorite authors. So when I saw this little novella, I was, intrigued. I thought, why not just read it, give it a chance. If I don't like it, then I can just DNF it. But I am so happy I read this book. I actually find myself thinking about these characters and I wish that we could get more from them. Anything that Abby Jimenez writes, I'm going to read, and I definitely think you guys need to pick up this short novella, short story, whatever, if you guys are in a reading slump, because it is fast-paced, it's really short, and you can honestly probably finish it in a day. I absolutely loved this book. The last recommendation I have for you guys is Listen for the Lie. I listened to this on audiobook and I cannot tell you how good this book is. If you guys like podcasts, I 1000% recommend that you guys need to pick this up, because one of the main characters in this book has a podcast and we kind of get to like see this podcast progress and see, you know, the interview between the two main characters. And oh my gosh, guys, this book was so good. I absolutely loved it, and I definitely recommend you listening to it on audiobook. So if you're looking for an audiobook to help you get out of a slump, I 100% recommend Listen for the Lie. Honestly, go in blind to this. It is kind of like a mystery thriller, but guys, I could not stop listening once I started. It was so good. So if you haven't read or listened to this book before, please, please, please pick it up. I promise you it will help give you that little push that you need to get out of your reading slump. Those were all of the tips and tricks that I had, as well as books that I have to recommend to you guys that I think will help you get out of a reading slump. Let me know if these books recommendations or if these tips and tricks helped you in the comments below. Also, let me know what books have helped you get out of a reading slump, or what books you think will help others or possibly me in the future get out of a reading slump down below in the comments. I'm super interested to see what books kind of helped you guys, or what books you think will help somebody. If you are in a reading slump right now, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. I promise you, you will get out of it eventually. Hopefully you can use these tips and tricks and book recommendations to help you get out of that reading slump. But that's all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and happy reading.